Next one I would slide is about the difference between stimming and sensory seeking. There is a difference, and I feel like most of the time it's a very fine line, but I think it's important to know the difference for self-regulation. So stimming is usually a calming strategies for kids to calm themselves down. It's most of the time they pick whatever they want to do, and they can do this at any time of the day. It's also just a fun activity. It also helps them to focus, for example, when they need to eat or in school and so forth. So it's a repetitive body movement, which can be hand flopping, body rocking, repeating words, like when your child says, "Mommy, I love you, Mommy, I love you," and you know your child loves you, but your child repeats this all day long, or it repeats certain phrases from a favorite TV show all day long. So that's a repetitive activity. And also body movements can be very repetitive. For example, when the kids always move their fingertips together, or touching soft fabrics, like always have to kind of play with it. From a sensory seeking perspective, this is self-regulating, and basically the difference between stimming and sensory seeking, when, for example, when you use the rocking movements, kids that do stimming, they kind of go the same movement back and forth. So it's always the same frequency. When you do when you use rocking for sensory seeking, you kind of increase the intensity. Then you throw your back into the couch more, sometimes less, and you kind of try to figure out how much do I like and how much do I need. So sensory seeking is usually, they can change the frequency, while stimming is usually always the same. So most of the time, sensory seeking can be done anytime during time that the kids are awake. And it's done because kids are feeling understimulated. While doing stimming, it's not any kind of understimulation. It's just because they want to stay regulated, or they have fun doing it, while sensory seeking is always understimulated. And they want to feel the stimulation. It can be also an inappropriate behavior, like chewing on objects, throwing into back of a chair, what we said, jumping off the counter. I have a lot of kids that enjoy jumping off the refrigerator, any kind of counter that they can climb on, which also becomes a safety concern. So then what do we do with this? So first of all, I think it's really important to understand the difference between stimming and sensory seeking, because if you have someone who is stimming and sensory seeking, from sensory seeking you can provide sensory strategies, while for stimming you don't really want to distract or stop it, because children just need this to stay calm and enjoy activities. So you also don't want to use any discipline activity as discipline, because usually it doesn't work. It's like the child will probably think, but I need this, and you are taking it away. So when you take away a stimming strategy for them, they will replace it with something else, and usually it gets more because you're taking away a strategy that they need in order to regulate. So you don't want to stop a stimming behavior. So what you can try is to redirect it. It's like you can either replace it with something that is the same, for example, when you use sensory seeking. So for example, when your child is rocking back and forth, and that can either be a proprioceptive input where they like this bam into the couch, or it can be a vestibular seeking input, and maybe you can replace it with a trampoline. You can maybe replace it with some wheelbarrow walk at the same time, or maybe with a sandwich game where you remember that, roll that ball over your body, to kind of give that input to see if that helps your child to calm down. I also worked with a child recently. He would always jump off the windowsill. So we put him into a weighted vest, which helped him to be more grounded, and he decreased the need of jumping off the windowsill. So his mom put him in it at home because he started climbing the kitchen counter, and he was only 4. So then also kind of figure out which sensory system is stimulated when your kid is sensory seeking, to provide that input to help out that he is they're more safe. And you also want to try to redirect to another activity, like I said, if you know which kind of sensory seeking input the child needs, you can replace it with something more safe. And use as little words as possible. If you give your child the instruction, don't do this, come here, and first we're going to stop this, and then we going to put shoes on because you're not safe here, your child will not understand too many words. So do it step by step, give short little instructions, so, and also make sure your child understood, so it's actually beneficial. Any questions to this so far?
Sorry, I have a question.
Of course.
I'm just having trouble with my phone. My son has a lot of auditory stimming where it's constantly or constantly fulfilling a need.
Mm-hmm.
He's not quite as disruptive yet at school, but at home it's very disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to take it away or discipline it, but I'm having a really hard time focusing myself. You know, cooking dinner, doing other tasks, you know, just putting like a pancake on a plate. It's very distracting. I don't really know how else to replace it.
Does he like music?
He does. For a while, he was actually singing some of his favorite songs in replacement, and it was amazing. He has such a cute voice. And that kind of stopped maybe about 6 months ago.
Yeah, that was my first thought. Let's see if he can sing songs. But maybe it's also like when you sing together with him, like you turn on some music, you sing in the kitchen while your son, I don't know where he is at that time, to kind of model the singing. Because most of the time, what I have noticed, kids, when they sing, it's the auditory input, what they want to hear. But some kids also like just what's going on in the throat. So that feeling that you get when you sing a lot. So does he maybe also like taking a sip or something, kind of redirect? That's also something to try.
He's also stopped drinking water lately, so that's been interesting as well. You have to kind of remind him to drink. I'll try again with the singing, but we do try and do that. We'll try like counting to 10 to kind of like self-regulate and something that's kind of a pattern that he's comfortable with. I don't know if maybe thinking about the song is too much work for him. But
sometimes modeling really helps. So kids kind of know what they do. Have you tried a weighted vest?
I have. Well, a compression, not a weighted one.
Yeah, so there's sometimes a difference between a compression vest and a weighted vest. Like we have some that we use that is a compression with weights inside. You can kind of play around what your child likes more. The difference between the compression and the weighted vest is more the compression vest gives more stability because it's tight, and the compression vest, the weighted vest, basically because of the weight, it grounds you more. And I have really had some really good progress with that because kids are just more grounded. And even though the weighted vest is not auditory, but can still help ground kids, even though you're not tapping into the same system.
Okay, thank you. I know his OT has tried it and has hit or miss, but it's only a 45-minute session, so we might have more luck at home.
Yeah, and to be honest, consistency is really key. Even like I feel like the more consistent you try something, you know your child. If they're really super resistant, I wouldn't go push for it. But if you kind of can get it on and they're kind of okay with it, even though they're resistant, I would just give it a try and be consistent trying it. Because sometimes they just need to process what's going on until they actually know, oh, that's actually feels good.
Okay. Is there an amount of time that you keep it on versus not? Because you probably shouldn't keep it on all day.
So a compression vest you can keep on all day. So because it's like more tight. With the weighted vest, they say when you do a seated activity, you should not keep it on for longer for an hour. But I think if you stick with the 5% of your body weight, and you kind of kid will tell you when they want to take it off. So you know your child the best. So I have tried either way, and depending on, I watch kids and kind of recommend parents just see how long they last, because at some point they will take it off.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. Sorry.
No, of course.
So I've got my 7-year-old son. He's autistic, but his stimming is not, it's annoying. in no in reasonable terms. Like just now, while you were explaining this to Narissa, he wouldn't stop saying, "I love mommy," like 8 times in a row. And of course, I'm like, "Yes, Christian, I love you too. I love you too." How do you, I guess, try to stop where it's like, okay, I heard you the first time, I heard you the second time. I need you to like lessen this. Or how do I redirect that without being like, okay, get away from me, kid, you bother me?
Right, and that's totally understandable because I know you love your child, everybody loves it, but if you hear this a million times at some point, it gets too much. So it's usually a language difficulty, where the kids kind of just repeat things over and over. I don't know if your child is in speech therapy, so that would be my first guess to kind of ask the speech therapist. But I would also try just to redirect in terms of what else does what your son like to say, like where you model, or I don't know, most kids like Paw Patrol, like, oh, we also love Paw Patrol, so you use the I love but in a different context, and to kind of see if you can redirect him, and to model you can use I love you and also in a different way, not just I love you mommy, I love you mommy, I love daddy too, or I love brother, I love sister, I love Paw Patrol, I love grandma. So kind of show him there is a different context that you can use that with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Any more questions? Okay. If there's a question coming in, just kind of raise your hand or shout it out, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay, so now let's look at the difference between meltdown and tantrums. Again, there's also a difference. A meltdown is usually an involuntary response to a stimulus. So their kids are overwhelmed by an activity that just can't help themselves and have like, that's their way of telling us it's too much and I can't regulate myself anymore. So it's usually when there's no daily routine, it's unpredictable, they're sensory overloaded, whatever's going on in their environment. Difficulty with transitioning. New routines can cause a meltdown, like either getting out of school, going into school, over the summer, returning to school, family member left, kids, older sibling went to college, like everything that's new. Unexpected, unwanted physical contact, meaning when we are in when kids are in line in school and other kids bump into them, it's unexpected. It's really difficult to tolerate them, but also not enough sleep, unbalanced diet, or when kids are sick. And I know that our children on the spectrum have in general a hard time with falling asleep on unbalanced diet. And that's another subject to discuss in a different webinar, but this can contribute also to meltdown, because when you're tired or when you're hungry or when your nutrition is not great, you're more prone to be overstimulated. Then when you feel sick, when you're stressed, and when you have panic, anxiety, that can have all a contribution to meltdowns. So, and preventing a meltdown is definitely not easy. But what we can do is just find the trigger points, just kind of understanding our child better and seeing what they need, what can we do to prevent it, or at least to minimize it. So I feel like in the sensory systems, there's always a red thread. So if a child has vestibular difficulties, there's always something that comes back. So for example, I was talking to a mother on Friday, and she reported to me that her child always wants her to lay on top. He likes running into stuff, he likes being pushed, he looks being pulled. My first thought, well, that's definitely the proprioceptive system. And then we did some brushing, and I explained mom, and she's like, oh, hang on a second, he really likes massages. Oh, he really likes when I put lotion on his skin. So there's always a red thread. So if you feel something and you think that's that system, kind of look for more trigger points, because in my opinion, it always goes somewhere. It's always like a red thread. It always is visible the more you actually look into each system. then easy to transitions, because the harder transitions are, the more difficult it is for the child to stay regulated. Provide heavy work beforehand. If you know, okay, this is going to be hard, maybe you can help your child be more regulated with some wheelbarrow walks, some hugs, do a swing activity before, the sandwich game with the ball, so to kind of help your child be regulated. It's just like when you had a hard day, you want to just sit down and maybe go get a massage after hard work training, to kind of help yourself be more regulated. Usually it's really hard to stop a meltdown, and I think it should not be stopped because a kid can't snap out of it like nothing. What you want to do is want to make sure that your child is safe. When they do a lot of head banging, put a pillow under their head or put your hand there so they don't get hurt, and just write it out. Some kids use headphones and earplugs in order to prevent a meltdown. What you also want to stay calm. And I know that's sometimes not easy. It breaks your heart that your child is so in pain and is so upset. And I think for every mother, every parent, it's a really heartbreaking situation. But I think as a parent, you need to stay calm in order to help your child. It's really you being there, provide any support your child needs, because if you're not calm, your child will not calm down themselves. So also making sure that it's more silent, like turn off the TV, turn off people that, or stay silent yourself, just be there. The more instructions and the more you talk, the more you actually feed into this over-regulation or overstimulation, and your child has an even harder time to come out. You can try rocking movements if your kid really likes sensory input from a vestibular system. Sometimes kids don't want to even be held. But I have had luck, not always, and it really depends on the child, when you just hold them and provide them some bear hugs, because and try to be consistent to see if your child at some point recognizes them and calms down. Also singing, very quiet, calm singing, and you can sometimes just be there, sit in the corner and do some humming to kind of help calming down. So the difference to meltdown and to a tantrum is that a tantrum is usually something, it's a choice to a reaction. So basically, if a child doesn't want to do something or wants to have something, it chooses to not get upset, but it's like it's a tantrum because they can't have something, or want to have something which they can't have in a moment. So it's something received what's not desired. It's a manipulative behavior. If they can't get it, they have a tantrum. A tantrum can also be just like a meltdown, can caused by not enough sleep, unbalanced, being sick, or also having difficulty with communication. Also, sometimes I have noticed with kids an attention-seeking behavior. If you don't pay attention to me because you're talking to someone or a call came in, I'm doing something to get your attention. So we also want to keep in mind that a tantrum can result in a meltdown, because at some point, if you're so upset and you can't regulate yourself, you're pushing yourself right into a meltdown, because then you have a harder time regulating yourself in general. So I think in order to work on tantrums, it's also a little bit age dependent. The younger the kid, the harder it is. Like with any kind of child, the importance is to understand the motivation, and most parents know their child. If they can't have the iPad, usually that causes a tantrum. Or we want to go to have dinner and, child doesn't want to eat. So kind of, you already kind of know when a tantrum is on the way. So, and I'm sure your ABA therapist, if you decided to have one, kind of can give you ideas too, but overall it's consistency. If the child knows, oh, well, I just have to go to dad and dad is going to give it to me, well, then there's no consistency, or mom is going to give in, or grandma, or whoever. So it's really the consistency that everybody's on the same page, and that you also as a parent are on the same page. Of course, you want to pick your battles. If it's not worth fighting over, it's not worth fighting over. But if there is something you really feel like that's important to you, be consistent, because kids, they know to push each other's buttons and they will figure you out. Then also provide a routine. So it's always the same. In the morning, it's always the same routine. So your kid knows what's coming next and how they can react to that. So like I said, get on the center page redirection. So if you feel like your child wants to have the iPad and you can't have the iPad because it's dead. So what are you going to do with it? Is there something else you can replace that with? Or is there some other favorite activity that you can use to transition away with? So it's kind of finding something that is motivating enough to redirect your child away from it. So exchange objects, like if you want to go somewhere and the kid is holding some marbles or a car that they don't want to let go, but that needs to stay here because you know you're going to lose it. Maybe there is the car key that the kid loves to have to open the car. So that's just an example. But find something that maybe only the kid only gets when you leave the house. So it knows that's the routine in order to transition. So kind of replacing of something other that is positive. So, and you also want to kind of ignore the negative behavior and praise the positive. For example, the kid throws the shoes and you tell the kid, don't throw your shoes, don't throw your shoes. And every time they throw the shoes, you get more upset, or you notice that your kid is looking at you, like if you really react. So ignoring it if it's not dangerous, and then when the kid stops, like, oh, thank you for stopping, and you don't even mention throwing shoes, it's just like you give something positive and completely ignore the negative. So, and the idea behind that is that you want to reinforce the positive behavior and completely ignore the negative behavior, not even mentioning what it did, because the more we reinforce positive, that's just like kids want to be praised. So, and so they mostly do more of what's fun than what's not fun. So, and if you give the attention to something that is positive, that's definitely usually more fun than when you're ignored. And you want to guarantee the safety of yourself and your child when kids are on a tantrum. So when they throw things, just kind of eliminate whatever can hurt them. You don't have to mention anything, you just put it somewhere away so it's more safe. And like I said, reinforcing positive behavior and eliminating punishment, because ultimately when you say, okay, we take the iPad away because you hurt your brother, most of the time, it's really difficult for our kids with autism to understand why they're being punished. All they remember, the iPad is gone, but they don't really understand, or not every child understands why they're being punished. It's the iPad is gone because he hurt his brother. That doesn't always resonate. It's most of the time you want to kind of find something more positive or motivating to have your child stop and kind of redirect them that way. Are there any questions? And I know it's getting late, so I understand when someone has to leave. Okay. So little tips and tricks when kids have a meltdown or a tantrum. So you want to kind of lower your body position. So the more eye contact there is, the better kids actually resonate and understand who's talking to them versus talking down, because we're just taller. So then you want to lower your voice, because when you lower your voice, it's usually less frightening and also more calming. So that goes back to, you can't use punishment or like normal discipline strategies, because kids just don't understand. So raising voice is usually not beneficial. So lowering a voice, it's more, so as soon as it's more quiet, kids tend to pay attention more. It doesn't mean that every child is like that, but play with your voice. So then also soften your facial expression, because when kids are really upset in a meltdown and you're frightened, they're going to be more frightened too. So model deep breathing. It's like, take a deep breath and exhale. So kind of just model and see if your kid can copy you. You can also dim the light. So when it's really a meltdown or a tantrum, when the light is down, it's usually that kids, it helps them to calm down, even for transitioning. When you're done, you turn the lights off and then try to get them to leave, or to transition to a next activity. Then also you can stop talking and just see how your kids react, especially when you have some attention-seeking behaviors. And then also change your proximity. So if you're close and you feel like it's not working, move away. Maybe change the body position of yourself to support your child. So from transitioning. So transitionings are usually really hard for kids, and it's just like you're watching your favorite movie and your husband or a friend comes, oh, let's go. And you're like, hang on a second, I'm not done watching this movie. I'm not prepared. If the other person probably told you 10 minutes earlier, hang on, you're leaving in 10 minutes, get ready. You have enough time to kind of prepare yourself and stop the movie at a time where you feel like you're not losing too much. It's all about preparation. So our kids usually have a hard time stopping what they're doing right now. And that's why you see more meltdown, because they're not ready. So you want to provide a heads up. You can either do this with timers. Two examples, I love both of them. The top one is the time timer. You turn it on and you show the red disappearing, and at the end it beeps, so the kid can always be referred. You look at the timer, that's how much time is left, and then it kind of can prepare better that needs to stop. The ones below, there are some that have 30 seconds, minute, 3 minutes, and so forth. So you can, based on what the child is doing, kind of like estimate how much time they need and then turn it on. What you can also use is, we talked about that earlier, use a visual schedule. This is a visual schedule for the morning where the child understands, put toothpaste on, rinse your mouth, brush the top, brush the bottom, rinse your mouth, and then spit in the sink. And this particular schedule is like the child, after every step, you can move the picture on the other side so they know exactly what's coming next and what they still have to do and which one is done. So you can also use a transition object or a toy. For example, it's done, so let's go get your favorite toy before we leave. Or like find something, like I mentioned earlier, if the child likes to use the car keys, then they get the car keys to open the door to help them transition out of the room. Or like let your child finish the task. If you know, okay, they only have to put on a couple more pieces of the Lego project, and you have time, just let them finish, and then you can say, once we're finished, we go. So, or you can also just provide constant reminders. Okay, we have 5 more minutes, look at the timer, we want to go soon, finish up. So they kind of really understand it's really time to go. Use distraction in order to also help them, and make sure that your child actually understood what you want. So if you feel like your child needs more sensory input, sometimes it's not just saying it, because then you just tap into the auditory system. Sometimes kids need to see it when you can use a timer there. Sometimes you have to hold your child and kind of provide a little bit more input, what you had talked earlier, so that child really understands what the instruction is, and kind of some kind of feedback that you feel like your child kind of understood what's going on. And then my advice is also, don't rush it. If you feel like your child has difficulties with transition, sometimes it's really also good for the parent to kind of plan, what do you need to do in order to help your child. And sometimes when there's too much stress and pressure, it's hard for the parent, but also hard for the child. Okay, thank you so much. That was the presentation. Is there any questions at the end?